Hello, friends. My name is Iris Josephina. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Planting Seeds podcast. On the Planting Seeds podcast, we explore how we can cultivate a more gentle relationship with our cyclical bodies, the earth, each other, and the world around us through using our senses, science, the subtle, and the secret. On Planting Seeds, we talk about all those topics we've always wanted to talk about. We are shamelessly opening up the conversations that we all so desperately need to settle in our precious bodies and relate to each other in a more open, truthful, and empowered way. I'm so glad you're here today. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Planting Seeds podcast. I am so grateful that you are tuning in today. I would love to talk about a bit of a controversial topic today. And I also want to state very clearly before I start that all the things that I will be sharing today are my very personal journey. It's about my very personal, intimate relationship with food and my body. And this podcast serves as an inspiration and is by no means an advice for you to do the same, nor are any of the things I will be sharing medical advice. And I really want to thank you for taking that into consideration. And I really invite you to listen with an open mind and an open heart. Now, I want to start by stating and sharing that I decided to return to an animal-based food diet after having been vegetarian and vegan for a lot of years, since I was 15. I am going to be 32 this year, so it's been a long time coming. And during these years, there were two things that were very clear. Like when I look back on it, during the time I didn't pay any attention to it, but two things were very clear. The hormonal birth control pill that I took for about 7 to 8 years, this amount of time, this period of time, was when my menstrual cycle health and my gut health was the worst, was really plummeting. And so I believe that being on hormonal birth control on top of being vegetarian and vegan wasn't the best for my physiologic constitution. And I also want to share that I became a vegan out of idealism, out of a belief that I really wanted to respect animals, that I wanted to respect the greater body of the planet and the earth. And I really deeply understand the wish in people to, go through with that idealism and to feel that you really deeply want to respect animals and their life and also Earth. And I definitely understand that, so I want to make that clear. But I also want to share that on a plant-based diet, being in this plant-based life that I had created for myself, I actually depleted my own body because I didn't have proper guidance on how to be vegetarian and vegan healthily and know about all the options to support my body through that. And at a certain point, I really realized that my very own firm beliefs and mindsets were actually standing in the way of my healing. I was struggling so much with so many things, and my body actually did not need this narrow belief of mine that being vegan was what I needed. Yes, it was absolutely in line with my ethics, with my values. But by doing that and by holding on to that, I did not pay any attention to what my physiology was telling me. And I was not picking up the cues that my body was giving me. Like I was feeling extreme fatigue. I had muscle loss, I had strength loss, I was suffering with brain fog, I was super shaky all the time. I had extremely painful periods. Sometimes I was even fainting during my periods. I had an extremely fast metabolism, which made me feel hungry all day and gave me blood sugar spikes and dips that really were absolutely out of this world. On top of that, I was suffering with irritable bowel syndrome, and I was hypersensitive to a lot of different foods. And at a certain point, I just really needed to let go of my rigid mindsets of how I should eat, because I was thinking it was the right thing to do, but then my body was telling me very different things. And I started to eat more intuitively. I started to look and feel into how my ancestors ate, what their diets were made of, and where their food came from. And my grandparents were farmers, and I just started to reflect on all of that. And 2 generations ago, like my grandparents and their parents, they would source their food close to home, locally. They would know exactly how the food was grown and where their meat came from and how it was raised, loved, and fed. But we don't really have that these days, and I really want to make clear that my way of consuming animal-based products is really rooted in the honoring of my ancestors, of knowing where my animal-based products come from, and really researching how the animals that I eat products from are raised, who are the people who are close to them, and I only buy from very small, transparent shops, and I do a lot of research on where they source from, and I simultaneously just listen to my body. And sometimes there will be a few days where I feel I don't need so much animal-based foods, usually right before ovulation, but in my luteal and menstrual phase, I will crave like big wild fish or egg yolks, more fats that are animal-based, like tallow or ghee, and bone broth. And I choose everything very carefully. And in my practice, I see people on similar journeys like I've been on. And most people in my practice who are suffering from period problems are eating a plant-based diet, but then simultaneously have no proper guidance on how to build their meals properly, what ratio of carbs and fats and complex carbs and proteins to use. And how it was for me and what I learned from my own body and also what I'm seeing in clients is that the body needs way more energy to get out of plants and transform it into the right energy and nourishment to give it to our body compared to a small piece of, for example, organic meat or fish. And what I also realized for myself is that the amount of energy and nutrition, I should use nutrition and nourishment, that I was putting in my body when I was eating a vegetarian or vegan diet was very low compared to the amount of energy that I was using. When I was on these types of diets, I was like in school. I had to like pay attention, use my brain all day. And later on, I was in university. I had to like take classes and do assignments and write papers and be like switched on the whole time. And it was so hard for me to, for example, keep focused. And later on, I learned that our brain actually needs a lot of protein. And I wasn't just eating adequate amounts of the right protein for my brain. And I only learned that later after I graduated. And so for me, it was really important to study all of this and study this in relation to my hormones and my body. And I will get back to that later. I just want to make very clear for everybody listening that I am totally, fully against the big meat industry, and I would never buy from that. And I believe this type of meat and how it is raised is very bad for our bodies. And I also believe that we have the ability to consume too much meat. And so that's why I really love intuitive eating, because with my intuition, I'm most of the time like really right on what my body needs when. And I really started to learn about the cues that my body needed. And so some of the cues that my body was giving when I was on a plant-based diet at a certain point was that my body actually also did not like all these processed plant-based foods and meat substitutes. And when I started to dive into that more, I'm also not agreeing like ethically with this whole industry, which is basically still very much based in capitalism. And these products are often created on soy fields for which they chopped Amazon forests. And on top of that, they are full of preservatives and are very processed very often. And that is also something that I cannot support anymore, like not at all. And for me, it's really about what choices do I make on the daily to support people. And for me, that is buying locally from people and know where my food is coming from. There are a few organic shops that really grow food locally that I buy from. And when I will move later this year, I will do the same in my new home place. I really want to invest time and energy to research, where does my food come from? Where can I see my food being grown and make sure that I support local people and people in the community? And then by doing that, also guaranteeing that I'm supporting my body in the best way possible and giving it enough nutrients to survive and to thrive. And, if I get into numbers when we're talking about protein, in a cyclical body, what I discovered for myself and after all the research and studies that I did, we need on average like 60 grams of protein per meal. If we look at that, it's around 60 grams. And that's not so much. So I'm not a person who eats like big chunks of steaks like 7 times per week. No, I keep it like very small. And if I feel I need more, I will add more in various ways, whether it is a piece of fish or eggs or organ meats or very small pieces of meat in a curry or a stir fry. And then I also add animal-based fats like I shared before, ghee and tallow. And so I want to get into these fats a little bit more, because what I discovered for myself is when I started to just analyze all the things that I had in my cupboard, I figured that I was using a lot of low quality plant-based oils, which contain a lot of omega-6, which is basically a building block for pro-inflammatory prostaglandins. And guess what they contribute to? Terrible period pain and cramps. And just to give you a little background on that, in the 1950s, vegetable oil increased due to a marketing strategy claiming that it would be better for heart health, which was a total lie. And modern day vegetable oil use is, one of the major causes of omega-6 and omega-3 imbalance in the body. So cooking with canola, corn, cottonseed, sunflower, soybean, and safflower oil make food much more omega-6 rich. And here I want to weave in the meat industry a little bit more, because feeding animals with corn and soy, which often happens in the meat industry, makes low quality meat more omega-6 rich too. So this is also one of the reasons why I never buy meat like that comes directly from the big meat industry. And the reason why an omega-6-3 ratio is so important lies in the different ways these fats affect the body. So both of these fats are building blocks to make a group of lipids in the body called prostaglandins, and they are found in every piece of tissue in the body and play a very crucial role in regulating inflammation. And if we look at omega-3 fatty acids, These are building blocks for anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, the prostaglandin E1 or PGE1, while omega-6 fatty acids are used by the body to produce pro-inflammatory prostaglandins E2 or PGE2. And when we have more omega-6 in our diet than omega-3, our bodies will produce more pro-inflammatory PGE2, and this causes our body to be in a chronically inflamed state, which is obviously what we don't want. And this is also something that I discovered in my own body. Like, I was using a lot of soy, I was using sunflower oil, and these things were just not okay. And for me, it's important to have a way of nourishing my body that avoids trans fat. And trans fat is an unsaturated fat that is exposed to high heat, and increase monounsaturated fats like olive oil and avocado oil. And if you want to stay plant-based, like, those are high quality oils. And then from fats, I want to move into protein. So I love proteins. Like, when I learned about protein for the first time, like, my mind was so incredibly blown. And proteins are made up of one or multiple chains of amino acids. I'm sure you heard of those. And different sequences of amino acids have different functions. And these sequences are determined by our genes, where our DNA provides like the building manual for all our protein sequences. And for those of you who don't know, there are about 20 amino acids in the body that the body uses, I should say, to build proteins it requires. And 11 of these amino acids are synthesized by the body itself, so we make them in-house. But 9 of them cannot be made by our bodies and need to come from outside of our bodies, so from our diet. And there are important aspects of these amino acids. And these 9 ones are called essential. So these 9 ones are like super important for our bodies. And a thing that I discovered that really changed how I look at physiology, I look at how my body uses nourishment and nutrition to just keep me going, is that animal protein, and I should say high quality animal protein, contains all 9 of these essential amino acids. They are also available in a variety of plant sources, but unlike meat, they are not usually found in one source, which requires vegetarians and vegans to be vigilant about consuming a wide variety of protein sources to ensure they're getting all of the amino acids in their body. And, here I also have to say that bioindividuality is key. Like, some people don't do well on meat while others do, and some don't do well on plant-based. And I was one of these people. Like, I felt so incredibly bad on a plant-based diet, and I only realized later what was causing me to feel so bad. And I also have to say that I tried to very carefully build my meals by weighing my proteins and making sure that every single meal contained every single amino acid that my body needed. And for me, it was just too tiring. It was extremely tiring to always have to focus on that, where, I could just eat a small piece of meat and not having to worry about that. And it also made me feel a lot more centered, a lot more focused in my body. I started to build muscle again, and I just in general feel way better. And again, I want to say, this is my personal story. You don't have to do this as well. This just serves as an inspiration for those who want to hear it. And then I want to get back to the protein and share a little bit about protein and hormones and the connection. So protein is an essential structural component of all hormones. So baseline of this is, what I learned is that I cannot make the necessary amount of hormone without an adequate amount of protein. When I was eating a diet that was very low in protein, which is less than 15% of your diet, or like 50 grams per day, this actually decreased my levels of leptin, my growth hormone, my thyroid hormones, and insulin. And a low amount of protein intake also stimulates a stress response, which drives the body toward fat storage and increasing both body fat and fatty liver. Like my body was not at that point yet, but when I was eating too little protein, I was definitely way more stressed. Like I was always stressing. Even when I was doing something peaceful, I always felt this rush in my body, this unsettledness and a deep fatigue that would just not leave. And that definitely changed how I felt towards like animal-based protein. Like when I started eating animal-based protein, my overall stress levels went down so much because my body just felt that it had more time to digest. And that's actually also what happens when we combine protein, fat, and carbs. Like carbs are the energy, but protein and fat really make sure that it's properly absorbed and that the body can really use all the energy properly. And I definitely felt that in my body. And another thing about proteins that I really love is that they're not only building blocks for hormones, but they also interact with them to maintain balanced blood sugar levels. And for me personally, my blood sugar levels were all over the place. Like I would have like sugar drops, insulin drops, like crazy. Like my friends could see it on me. Like my face would get like really pale. My eyes would like be a little bit further in their sockets. And my friends would say like, Iris, do you need to eat? And I was like, yes, I need to eat. I have to eat now. And I would get hangry, like super hangry. And ever since I started incorporating more animal-based protein on top of my plant-based food, I've never had that anymore. Only when I wait too long with eating, like I feel hungry and then I wait for an hour or an hour and a half, which I rarely do, then is when I will start feeling the hangriness. But I never feel that way anymore. And it's truly a blessing. And this is also the downside of plant protein. So while animal protein comes with fat, plant protein comes with carbohydrates, and this can lead to blood sugar dysregulation. And on top of that, plants also produce what is called anti-nutrients, which is a chemical produced by a plant to protect them from being eaten. And they also keep us from absorbing nutrients from a plant that we may need. So we really need to know how to properly prepare plant-based foods, preferably not eating them raw, but cooking them or steaming them or sprouting them or soaking them so that we are sure that our bodies can properly take in the nutrients of the plants that we eat. And then from there, I do want to move into talking a little bit about soy in general. For most people, and I've definitely experienced this myself, soy is quite hard to digest because it contains trypsin inhibitors, which basically inhibit digestive enzymes. And it also contains isoflavones. I actually don't know how to pronounce that word. Which are the most potent phytoestrogens, which is a plant estrogen that kind of mimics estrogen in the body. And phytoestrogens are implicated in testosterone deficiency, infertility, thyroid suppression, and most people I work with become estrogen dominant when they consume too much soy. So I am very careful with soy always. And I always tell my clients to be careful with soy as well. And I would like to end this sharing by saying that it was very hard for me to start eating meat again. I started with fish and chicken. Like I started with hydrolyzed collagen because that was a powder that tasted like nothing and which includes all essential amino acids. I buy mine from a brand called Noordcode, which is a shop in the Netherlands, which is very transparent about where they source their products from. And this particular one is made from French cows. And I will put the link in the notes so that you can go to the website and you can also receive a discount on this collagen. They have more products. They also have incredible ghee, coconut-based products. Go check it out. And I will share my discount code in the notes as well. And so after the hydrolyzed collagen, I started with fish and chicken because all the rest honestly made me gag. And I really needed to re-educate my body to eat meat again. And later, actually, I learned from one of my teachers that a lot of people who only eat a plant-based food actually have disrupted stomach acid. And then when they start eating meat again or animal-based protein, those symptoms disappear as well. And, I also need to say that how we eat and what healthy means for our unique bodies is so bio-individual. And food and nutrition, there is no one size fits all. And I know that we live in a culture where we desire quick fixes and we desire, to have something that works. But my invitation to you is to start listening to your body and tuning into your intuition and see what these two are telling you. And for me, that made all the difference. I really realized that a lot of the voices that I heard was my mind yelling, my ego yelling about, you have to be ethical and you have to, respect your values. And by doing that, I actually completely missed all the things that my body was telling me, which actually kept me sick. And I just really hope that my story may serve as a door that opens for you so that you can start exploring in your own life with your own body, listening more closely to what it is that your body is telling you. What is your body telling you that it needs? And I also have to say that sometimes we cannot decipher our symptoms because we have not learned what these specific messages from our body mean. And that is also where my work comes in. I work with nutrition. I work with teaching people how to listen to their bodies, what symptoms could potentially be related to a specific nutrient that they may need or a specific change in the ratio of protein, fat, carbs, and complex carbs that they may be missing because they don't know. And therefore, this is also an invitation to you. If you're struggling with certain things, with your menstrual cycle, with gut issues that you maybe can't even, describe or think of, or that they are potentially connected to your menstrual cycle. A lot of metabolic issues in our body are connected to our hormones. And if you have a hormonal imbalance, chances are big that your metabolism and your gut and your liver may need some love and attention and care as well. And I really want to invite you to book a free call with me if you want to talk about this. And then we can see together how your specific body receives the best support and what it's asking for. Because all bodies respond differently. All bodies receive support differently. So if you're inspired to talk about this, if you're inspired by my story, feel free to share it. Also feel free to rate the podcast if you haven't done that already. And also feel free to write me on Instagram, DM me about how this podcast made you feel, how it made you think, how it opened your mind. And I'm curious to know what your journey is with potentially going back to animal-based foods after having eaten a plant-based diet for a very long time. And thank you so much for tuning in, for making it through this podcast, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, with your friends, with your family, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or a review on all the platforms. To catch all the latest news from me, you can follow at the Planting Seeds Podcast on Instagram or at Cycle Seeds on Instagram. or you can go to my website, www.cycleseeds.com. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you next time.